So this is your dynamic with this left brain thing. You could have anything. You could be anything. You could be, instead of being Jeff Buckley, I could have been, a musician, or let the musician within me out, let my voice out. Instead of trying to force my voice to be someone else's voice, I could have just been my own voice. There's infinite possibilities with that. I can be a million different people from one day to the next. And that's what music feels like when you're doing it properly. It feels like you're sort of representing different parts of yourself over time. But instead I said, no, I must be this one voice, and I must do exactly like this to inspire people this exact way. And so I chose the Sisyphean hell. I was climbing that rock, dragging that rock up and up again, over and over again. And so, again, to get it back to the Red Book, I wanted to bring it down to that level to give you a tactile understanding of what was going on. I wanted to give you a visceral understanding of how this appears on a personal level, how the neuroscience behind this stuff works, how it's so trapped into dopamine, and how that actually screws up your ability to focus on things and get you stuck in channels. Okay, now with Jung in the Red Book, he seems to be confronting something collective as much as it's individual. He's stuck in the scientism of whatever Freud was into. He's perhaps stuck in that bubble a little bit, and then on top of that, he's stuck in an entire paradigm, as we said. And this is the scientific progress paradigm. This is the plebiscite thinking, where and think about this, right? Where you have this mountain, and at the top of the mountain, you have the ideal. You have to think of the archetype of the Messiah or the hero. And I put Jeff Buckley there. I put Cristiano Ronaldo before. And the goal is to progress up this mountain. And everybody who tries to drag you away from this progress, you irrationally hate. Okay? Now think about how this stuff works in our current paradigm, because our paradigm is very similar to Jung's paradigm. We have this scientific notion of progress towards the utopia, whatever the hell this is. And we've got this weird notion that the people who might come and offer alternate perspectives become heretics, anti-science and all this stuff. And the most specific form of anti-science is the unreasonable person, the person who's not talking like a left brain. It's almost like the entire scientific paradigm is the left brain stuck in a dopamine spiral towards an elaborate utopia that it's never going to reach, and it's rationalizing this to make sense. Like what the left brain does is interestingly called rationalization. You think that's a good thing, but what that actually is where, and you'll see this in the CPS Gray thing, where if I'm going on my path towards Cristiano Ronaldo and someone comes and shows me brilliantly solid evidence that, they show me a scientific study that says training the same exercise over and over again will lead to injury, so you should not do it. I will see that, and this is so interesting about this. I will see this. I will see reality literally in front of my face, hard documented science. And what I will do is my left brain will create a fake story to keep me on track, because sometimes it's better to be progressing than it is to be in touch with the truth. Sometimes, not always, but this is the fault with this. So you'll show me this hard document and my left brain won't read it, won't understand it. It will just project negative dopamine spirals or something like that at it, and I won't even see it, and I'll be like, oh well, that's biased science based off a bogus science person, and it's not like on mainstream media or something like that, so I don't believe it, or it's not, and my coach didn't tell me, or something like this, and I'll go back on my channel. And this is what your left brain does. It wants to keep you on track. It becomes a bit tyrannical. And if you expand this to the extension of the entire society, it seems to have these type of problems. We seem to be very, very pro-rationalization people. And then when you get a load of left brains together and they all get into a group and do this stuff, it almost becomes like a cult, a religion. This is what you could understand as religion. This is what you could understand as the corrupter of religions. You can make a good argument that Jesus was a juicy boyo, but of course Christianity ended up being dogmatic and heretical, and it was constantly trying to preach this notion of it's progressing towards something. And every cult and sect and denomination of Christianity has the same problem. It knows the right way forward and everyone else is a heretic, and you get trapped inside of that stuff. And then of course Christianity falls, and we'd imagine that we'd all be free to become Richard feckin' Dawkins and juicy and all this. But then this whole thing is now starting to reveal itself as similarly a cult. It's got its dogmas, it's got its dopamine spirals, it's got its progress and all that, and it seems like like we're trapped in this perpetual loop, because the problem is our minds. The problem is we don't know how to use our minds. This was Jung's thesis about individuation. We don't understand ourselves, and so we are the thing that is in the way from progress. It's us, our things that we need to conquer, and it's largely about subjugating the left brain to the tyranny of the right brain. That's what's probably going to happen. And we're going to have to empower Grug to escape Plato's cave, the cave of the left brain, the cave that keeps you entranced in your pain and it tells you it's virtue. And so the one specific thing you see that's so consistent is the notion of madness as not normal as good. Dogma, the obedient as good, the one who's progressing with us as good. You're on our team, and the outsider as evil, as insane, as mentally ill. This type of thing as wrong. And so this is what happened with Christianity. You would have the healthy Germanic pagan running around being all like beautiful shape, living in nature and all this, and they'd categorize him as Satan, as evil, as a monster, and they'd use that to take him down, to tame him, to turn him into something civilized. But then that's no different, because now you see what's going on is the same psychological problem, where you see the Christian, and the Christians are all upright moral people who are doing the best to try to keep their communities together, and people walk in and call them ignorant and backwards and mentally ill religious thinkers and all this. And you have these patterns consistently showing up. And then what's interesting about our paradigm is that as we've got into this sort of scientific normalization, as Foucault noticed, this idea of there's a perfect way that you want people. It's almost like this docile consumer, all right? The insane person, the person who's weird, the weirdo, the more right-brained person, the person who might have became an oracle back in the day, they're considered as mad, as not normal, as dangerously wrong. And what they need to do is they need to be, loaded up with pills or lobotomized. They literally did this at times. They took out parts of their brains in order to get the people to stop being weird, so that they could normalize them, they could keep them in track and whatnot. And you can see the seriousness that this ideology, this collective thinking that we have, you can see the seriousness that it comes down. We will rip people's bodies apart to fix them to the ideal that we want. We will destroy human bodies, irrelevant of what we say about how much we care about people, in order to fix them, in order to get rid of the pathology of psychological madness, of difference. And Foucault pointed this out in a very, very interesting way. Like, people who were insane back in villages back in the day, like possibly even like schizophrenic and stuff like this, they'd have this role as the crazy bastard who had something to say, interesting perspectives, almost like this dream speaker in the corner of the pub. They weren't ostracized, they weren't compartmentalized into, a mental health institution. They were actually put in, they lived in the village. They were integrated into the fabric of reality. They'd almost be seen in the Christian sphere as in touch with God in some sense. You can imagine it like an oracle in ancient Greece. Imagine if someone had they literally destroyed their left brain, and all they were was this right brain communicating with the cup is all this crazy. It would be very, very useful, because this is a very hard thing psychologically to do. It's very emotionally difficult to break out of your dopamine spirals. And so if you meet someone who's insane back in the day, who's got all right brain, if you know what I mean, if they're really in touch with that, and the oracle, they could be very, very useful for getting wisdom from, because they would see things in a different way. They literally have divided the labor in the individual to shut that part of themselves off, and it would have been a useful thing to interact with. Perhaps this is a function that priests and monks, when they were doing their job well, would have performed. We don't really know. But nonetheless, this weirdness, this shamanic personality would have actually been integrated into the culture a lot better than it is now, because we've become so ideological towards our normalcy that we're finding it hard to fit these people in. It's weird. The heretics are extremely religious. This is a Nietzschean statement that is just so genius that he spotted this. He said that though the religious beliefs of Europe are falling, the religiousness and the instinct of religion is rising radically, and it's going to be ridiculous for this coming century. And he was on the money, 1,000,000%, as Jung picked it up as well. Jung was on the money with this stuff as well. We've got a serious problem, it seems, coming on.